to be a president who seeks not to divide, but unify. Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war. The MAGA Republicans don't just threaten our personal rights and economic security. They're a threat to our very democracy. The Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. And that is a threat to this country.
That last clip from last night's speech in Philadelphia with the eerie red lighting and 2 Marines on duty for what was a pretty political speech at the White House. Here was the response to questions about the Marines being there and the nature of the speech.
We see that as leadership, and we see that as presidential. To your question about the Marines, look, the president gave an important speech last night, a critical speech, and an added inflection point. And, you know, our democracy, our values that our men and women who protect us every day and fight for it every day believe in as well.
With that, let's bring in our panel. Trey Gowdy, former congressman from South Carolina, Leslie Marshall, Democratic strategist, and syndicated radio host Hugh Hewitt. Panel, welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, Mike.
Trey, lead us off. So thoughts about the speech last night? What about the Marines being there and the White House insisting it was an official speech and not a campaign speech?
You know, Mike, I think threats to our democracy abound. And, you know, January 6th is a pretty obvious example. There are plenty of examples on the other side of the aisle. And if you want to be a real leader at a time when this country needs a unifier, then you would point out, I mean, many of us consider progressive prosecutors who can undo a legislative act by themselves to be a threat to democracy. Many of us consider presidents who sign or issue executive orders that they know violate the Constitution to be a threat to democracy. The other thing that caught my attention is the president's definition of a good Republican is one that agrees with him. I mean, over half the country doesn't agree with him on most of his policies. So how can that be the definition of a good Republican, that you can work and agree with Joe Biden?
Leslie, here we are. It is Labor Day weekend, typically the launch of campaign season. The president gave the speech, and he's taken some heat for it. Your thoughts?
Well, first, Trey, your first line we agreed on, and that scares me. We've been agreeing way too much lately. Second, love a man in uniform. Bring out more Marines, please, and to make our nation further proud. Third, every time a politician, president, Democrat or Republican, opens their mouth, it is political in nature to some degree. I've said before, I think it's too divisive and not uniting to say all MAGA Republicans, calling people semi-fascist, you know, hearkening back to the deplorable basket of deplorables with Hillary Clinton at the time during her campaign. But I do agree that first line that Trey said, that democracy is under attack. And I do further agree in that statement that he started with, that January 6th was an example of that, that we saw people willing to overthrow our government and to do violence to do it. And further, polls show that voters, especially in states like Michigan, are putting this high, equal, and sometimes topping the economy as the midterms approach.
Hugh, the broadcast nets did not take it live last night, clearly thinking it was more political than official. Your thoughts?
Well, Mike, it wasn't a pro-democracy speech. It was a pro-Democratic Party incumbent speech. They're clearly in trouble. Now, I think it will be remembered for the staging, maybe the worst optics of a presidential speech that I can recall. It'll also be remembered for what he didn't talk about. He didn't talk about his student loan big announcement just a week ago. It's played so poorly with Americans across the board that he's now down to kind of cliches about Donald Trump and his supporters and extremism. But really, using Independence Hall, that black and red lighting, the Marines, it did not go over well. And I think his 38% Reuters poll approval is going to be even lower next week. I think the Democrats are in a world of hurt. They know it. He threw a Hail Mary last night, and it wobbled.
All right, let's pivot to the economy. First Friday of the month means it's Jobs Report Friday. Here's how some of the analysts broke it down.
315,000 coming in for non-farm jobs. That is a slight beat over estimates.
The jobless rate actually went up a little bit.
The labor force participation rate, 62.4. If there's one area that I'm always happy to see the numbers expand on, that would be it.
The bottom line is jobs are up, wages are up, people are back to work.
Trey, what's the state of the American economy?
Jobs are up. Credit for that. Other markers are not good. Inflation, yeah, gas prices are coming down, but they were really, really high. So, I mean, who would have, look at the stock market. I mean, who would have thought that putting money in the stock market was a riskier proposition than taking out a $10,000 student loan to study anthropology? Who would have thought that?
All right, Leslie, your take on the economy.
I'm not an economist, but the economists that I have spoken to have said when you look at this report, especially with the increase in wages, there's more optimism that the feds won't have to be as harsh, raising, raising the inflation. I don't want to say the inflation rate. Sorry, interest rates. Excuse me. 0.75%. Now they're looking at either 1/4 or a half. So that certainly is good for the feds not to be as aggressive with that increase, and that to me shows that economists are pretty happy with this. Certainly they could be happier, but it's not doomsday, this report, at all.
All right, Hugh, your turn.
The Dow was up early on that jobs report. Good news. By the end of the day, it had tanked. Third week in a row, it's down. People who are looking forward are not optimistic. The direction of the country is poor, and the prognostication for the economy is worse.
All right, we asked our esteemed panelists for midterm races that they are watching as we head into the Labor Day weekend. Trey, why don't you lead us off?
Florida Senate race, Val Demings versus Marco Rubio, and I'm happy to tell you why, but you may not want me to tell you why. You may want me to defer and let Hugh and Leslie go.
All right, Leslie, your turn, midterm race to watch.
Georgia Senate race, we're looking at the incumbent, who is Reverend Raphael Warnock, against football legend Herschel Walker. And interestingly enough, Mr. Walker's trying to paint Mr. Warnock as a liar and brings up some lies of his own. Not sure that's the best campaign strategy, but I think it's interesting and a very close race to watch at this point in time.
All right, so two hot Senate races. Hugh, your turn.
Mine's also in the Senate, Mike. Dr. Oz was on my radio show this week and really knocked it out of the park. The morning after, Stephanie Ruhle over at MSNBC did a softball pre-taped interview with John Fetterman. Prayers for John Fetterman's recovery, but he's clearly struggling. I don't think it's a 7-point race. I think it's very close right now, and we did have a couple of polls showing at 4 points. Dr. Oz is rallying his base, bringing back the McCormick voters. I'm very confident about that, and I don't think Mr. Fetterman's going to be able to campaign, and he is so far left. If he does, he'll lose voters anyway.
A lot of questions about whether or not there will be any debates in that race. We'll see where it goes. Trey, do you want to button things up since you teased us?
Well, I mean, you know, Marco is a mainstream Republican, so he's going to spend a lot of time having to explain what his fellow senator from Florida said about Social Security. And Val Demings is not a defund the police hippie, so it's kind of an unusual race, and I'll be watching it.
Time now for winners and losers. Trey, why don't you lead us off?
My winner, marriage counselors, because college football starts this weekend. My loser is the devil, because now everyone in the world knows where he lives because Biden used his house as the backdrop for his speech last night.
Oh, Leslie. Oh. Leslie, your turn. Winner and loser of the week.
My winner is Mary Peltola. She flipped a red seat blue in the state of Alaska. She beat Sarah Palin, who had bigger name recognition, former governor, and was VP on the McCain presidential ticket. She also is the youngest, the first woman, and the first Native Alaskan. That is my winner. My loser, Thomas Webster, a former NYPD police officer who's just been sentenced to 10 years for assaulting a Capitol Hill police officer.
A lot of people looking at that Alaska race trying to figure out if it means something for November or whether Alaska is just a different place. Okay, Hugh, your turn, winner and loser.
Well, the winner tomorrow will be Ohio State, of course, but let's talk about Herschel in Georgia. He's up in one poll, and Joe Day in Colorado up in another. We got a couple of Democrats on the run who are incumbents, a couple of Republicans no one thought could win are going to win. The loser is Central Europe. Russia today announced the continuation of its ban of gas exports from their big Russian oil companies. Putin plays hardball. Originally, it was going to be 2 days. Now it's extended indefinitely. Going to be a long, cold, and expensive dark winter in Germany because of Putin's hardball.
Panelists, thanks. We got to run.